Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Anxiety Toolbox Session 3. Before we jump in to today's session, I want to remind you that you can access the workbook on the EVC website, linked here below. Okay, so we're going to start off by summarizing what we've discussed in the past two sessions and reviewing your homework. Then we'll shift into today's topic, which is focused on cognitive restructuring, which is taking a different thinking approach, and self-care. We'll wrap up by putting it all together so you can create an action plan for managing your own anxiety. So during the last two sessions, we discussed the interactions among the four anxiety symptom clusters, which were thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and physical sensations. We learned about automatic thoughts, and we began to identify and address unhelpful thinking styles. We have been using the CBT model worksheet to help solidify these concepts. So you were asked to complete the CBT model worksheet since our last session, focusing specifically on noticing unhelpful thought patterns. So please take a minute to pull that out and just review it for yourself and see if you noticed any of those unhelpful thought patterns. Think about how the assignment went for you. So we are going to start with practicing deep breathing skill that we've already learned. So first, let's take a thermometer reading of your current anxiety level. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very low to non-existent, and 10 being the most severe anxiety you've experienced, where are you right about now? You don't have to say it out loud, but just jot it down. What's your number right now? Okay, now let's take some deep breaths. Taking a deep breath in through our nose, counting in our mind, 1, 2, 3, 4. Imagining using the air we breathe fill our stomach. Hold for a count of 1, 2, then breathing out through our mouth for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, and pausing before we start again. Now let's all try to breathe. Breathe in for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for a 1, 2, and breathe out for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try it again. Breathe in for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, and breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now let's take a new thermometer reading. Please rate your current level of anxiety on the scale from 1, very low to none, to 10, most severe. Did you notice a shift in your numbers? So now we're going to transition to taking an alternative look at the CBT model worksheet. By now, you're probably familiar with the CBT, cognitive behavioral model, but let's take another look at it before incorporating the next component. You begin using the simple CBT model worksheet by identifying an anxiety-provoking event or situation, and then noting the interactions of your experiences of anxiety symptoms. we have found that the cognitive, which is the thought component, is heavily weighted. For example, that's the way you think about or interpret a situation, and it can perpetuate the anxiety and then trigger another symptom. We spent the majority of last session talking about the impact of automatic thoughts and unhelpful thought patterns. You may be asking yourself, so what now? What do I do about it? Remember that we've learned two activities, deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, NPR, to help address the physical symptoms directly. Also, remember, by addressing the physical symptoms directly, you're really freeing up the mental energy to address the other symptoms. You may also recall that we talked about how completing the CBT model worksheet is actually an additional tool that puts a special emphasis on the impact of thoughts. This tool is really to help you get better at recognizing your triggers and requires that you slow down and detangle the symptoms you're feeling. Okay, so now let's focus on how to address the unhelpful thoughts directly through cognitive restructuring. What we mean by cognitive restructuring is taking a different thinking approach to the anxiety-provoking situation. This involves purposefully slowing down, challenging your automatic and unhelpful thinking patterns, and giving yourself a broader perspective on the situation. This process takes time and practice, so really try to be patient with yourself. Here's how it works. When you start to notice anxiety, think to yourself, stop, pay attention, and get perspective. This means getting better at taking the time to pay attention to what's going on in your mind and body, and then be intentional about what happens next. What we want to do here is slow down the anxiety process so that you don't get caught up in the anxiety and just react. Slowing down, reflecting, and using these skills allows you to feel more in control. The ultimate goal is for the stop and pay attention mantra to become second nature so that you can use it even before experiencing the anxiety. However, that's going to take time and practice. To better understand this stop and pay attention mantra, let's work through the example of alternative responses to anxiety. I want to highlight that when we are using an alternative response, we're not just saying think positive or don't worry about it, because you have probably heard that before, and you know it's not that simple. What we're saying is, let's look at the situation from a broader perspective. So, for example, going back to the sample anxiety provoking situation that was introduced in session 1 of being invited to a party and feeling anxious about going, one of the alternative responses is, I might still have an okay time. It's important to remember that you're probably not going to jump from the thought, I'm going to have a terrible time, to the thought, I'm going to have a blast. Make sure your alternative thoughts are realistic and believable. Don't try to jump to the positive extreme, as this would be an example of unhelpful thinking style, black and white thinking. When we are filling out an alternative response worksheet using the anxiety provoking event of getting invited to a party, let's review the example on page 29 of your workbook. So reviewing alternative responses could look like, I may not be as socially awkward as I think. She probably wants me there. If she invited me, I might still have an okay time, even if I'm anxious. Different types of alternative responses will be helpful depending on the situation and the person. There's not a one-size-fits-all response. Using the anxiety-provoking event from your homework assignment from last week, fill out the blank alternative response worksheet on page 32. Use pages 30 and 31. If you're having trouble, ask yourself these questions as a guide. These questions are really intended to guide you to think of which alternative responses might work best for you in that given situation. Using these questions can really help you practice until coming up with an alternative response seems more second nature, which again is going to take time and practice. So you can pause the video and work on that alternative response worksheet. So we've spent a lot of time talking about ways to manage this unhelpful thoughts, since thoughts are so powerful and are a big part of the CBT model. However, these strategies are only one of several ways to cope with your anxiety symptoms. Let's shift into some other strategies you can add to your toolbox. Let's start by talking about grounding. Grounding involves various techniques that help you really recenter by pausing, refocusing, getting unstuck, and coming back to the moment. Grounding techniques can be helpful for people whose anxiety manifests as a physical, sensory symptom. So that can include depersonalization, so feeling disconnected from one's body or their thoughts, feeling like one is floating above their body. And there's derealization, which is feeling like one's surroundings are flat, lacking emotion, or not real. The technique that we're going to learn now is a sensory experience that you can use anywhere, anytime. This technique is called 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Without saying it out loud, observe 5 things you can see in the room. Observe 4 things you can feel, such as the chair on my back, my feet on the floor. Now, observe 3 things you can hear right now. Observe 2 things you can smell right now. Now think of one good thing about yourself. How was that for everyone? So that exercise may have resonated with some of you and not with others. Remember, not every coping strategy we teach will work in every situation for every single person. It takes practice to figure out the tools that work best for you and your circumstances. What we really hope is that you're creating a toolbox for anxiety and using the tools you need when you need them. You get to choose what to put in that toolbox and what you take out of it. So in the appendix on page 41 and 42, there's information about a number of other grounding strategies to try, and you can add those to your toolbox. Take a moment to review those, star them, highlight, circle all the potential strategies that could work for you. Another aspect to keep in mind while focusing on really addressing your anxiety is your overall self-care. Sleep hygiene, which is having good routines and tools for sleep, is one of the best self-care strategies because sleep affects everything else about your health. In addition to practicing good sleep hygiene, exercise, a balanced diet, minimal caffeine use, no or minimal drug and alcohol use, and pleasurable activities are also important in maintaining a healthy mind and body. So page 35 provides a chart of pleasant activities that can also be used for self-care and as coping strategies. Pause the video, take a minute to review the chart. As you review the options, highlight, circle the ones that you feel like, okay, I could start to incorporate these into my daily or weekly routines. Now let's put everything we have learned into an action plan for managing anxiety. On pages 36 and 37 in your workbook is a worksheet with a number of questions about recognizing symptoms and triggers and implementing some of the coping strategies we discussed. We're going to spend a good amount of time on this so you can come up with your own plan to take with you. So go ahead and start. So pause the video and look through these worksheets. So before we conclude, let's take a moment to figure out how you're going to remind yourself that you have a plan for managing anxiety and that you have really set goals. It may be helpful to review your plan at a certain time each day, such as in the morning or before you go to bed, or you could look at it before an anxiety-provoking situation. Some people find it helpful to just take a picture of their plan and have it easily accessible on their phone. You can also write your goals on Post-it notes and keep them visible. Or maybe you could ask a friend to check in with you about your goals. So, what are some of the ways that you can remind yourself about your plan? Go ahead and write them at the bottom of page 37. Okay, so let's talk about what we've learned in these 3 sessions. We discussed anxiety symptoms with a focus on ways in which our thoughts, behaviors, feelings, and physical symptoms interact. We also increased awareness of triggers and unhelpful thinking styles and identified coping strategies for dealing with these symptoms. So one thing I really would like for you to remember is that you will have to practice these strategies regularly to effectively manage anxiety. So remember that some amount of anxiety is normal in the human experience. With consistent practice, the coping strategies we learned in this workshop series will really help maintain our abilities to manage anxiety and prevent feelings of overwhelm by anxiety. We created a personalized action plan that will help you continue to practice your skills in the future. So make sure that you use your plan even when your anxiety is low as a maintenance measure. So actually, in fact, this can be most helpful to practice when your anxiety is low rather than waiting until the extreme anxiousness, because this really allows the skills to become second nature. So when you do feel anxious, they come more easily. So you've learned a lot of great skills to address anxiety over the past few weeks. You also now have an individualized action plan. Reminder, it will take time and practice to incorporate these changes before they become automatic. So you can always refer back to this workshop series again if you would like to. And we also have other great groups and workshops which may benefit you. Please feel free to reach out to the Wellness Center here at EVC. Thank you for your participation.